I found evidence that my parents may not be my real parents, uncovered horrifying truths, and discovered my real identity. I, Lisa, 26F, recently faced a heartbreaking tragedy. My parents were always a bit unconventional, living as self-sufficiently as they could. This meant relying on well water, their own sewage or septic systems, and using solar and propane for power. Unlike most people living this way, they weren't conspiracy theorists, although they had plenty of friends who were. They lived in an old house heated by propane, and, unfortunately, a water heater malfunction caused them to succumb to carbon monoxide poisoning in their sleep. It's been an incredibly tough time for me. I was the one who discovered their passing, technically speaking. My mom messaged me every single day, and when I didn't hear from her last week, I knew something was wrong and called for a welfare check. My boyfriend, while supportive when he's around, has been largely unavailable since I discovered their passing. So, I've been handling most of this on my own. Everything is happening so fast that I haven't even had a moment to process it all. I went to West Virginia this past weekend. After handling the arrangements for their cremation, I headed to their house. I stayed at a nearby hotel, which was a 45-minute drive away. But during the day, I was getting the house in order. Staying there overnight by myself was just too overwhelming. My mom had saved a lot of mementos and photos, which was kind of nice to go through. I should probably provide some more background on my life at this point. My parents moved back to West Virginia when I was 20. My grandfather, whom I saw once or twice a year, had taken care of the place for 20 years while we traveled around the country for my dad's work. My dad would visit my grandpa every December, but my mom and I never went with him. When I did see my grandpa, it was always him coming to us. My dad made a living doing doomsday prep work. He wasn't a prepper himself, but we traveled to various places like Montana, Utah, and many spots in the Rocky Mountains, where he would build bunkers, security fences, and outposts. He knew how to do all this stuff and had a few guys he could call on for help. He always said he got these jobs because he worked for cash, left no paper trail, and kept everything discreet. It wasn't cheap for his clients. Throughout my childhood, we were always on the move, and I was homeschooled. Despite our unconventional lifestyle, my parents made sure I had access to the internet and wasn't taught any crazy ideas. They emphasized self-reliance to an extreme degree. You'd be surprised how quickly I can fix a car problem or how accurately I can throw knives. They also prioritized my health, making sure I saw doctors when needed and got vaccinated. I mention this because when I tell people about my parents, they often assume they were crazy anti-vax, government-hating types, which they weren't. As I got older, I begged to go to a real high school. My parents eventually agreed, and we moved to Burlington, Colorado. Adjusting was a bit challenging, but I loved being around people for more than a few months at a time. I did all the typical high school things, made friends, dated, went to dances, played sports, and so on. After high school, I went to the University of Colorado on a pole vaulting scholarship. After college, I got a job near Boulder and met my current boyfriend. Back to the main point of this post, while going through old photos, I noticed something alarming. My mom backed up photos on zip drives, and as I looked at ones labeled Lisa's First Thanksgiving, nothing seemed off at first. But then I saw photos labeled Lisa's First Christmas, and I was noticeably smaller. It wasn't just a matter of camera angles. I was genuinely smaller with way more hair. There was no way I grew that much hair in 30 days. All the pictures before Christmas were in or around this house. But starting that Christmas, they were of my parents' camper and the various rentals and campsites we lived in until high school. It seemed like they just moved out overnight and never returned. Adding to my unease, there's one folder among the hundreds on the dozen or so zip drives that's password protected and locked. It dates back to December 2013. I'm not tech savvy enough to break into it, so I'm planning to overnight the zip drive to my boyfriend in CO. He has friends who might be able to hack into it. Am I being paranoid? Is this just grief clouding my judgment? I loved my parents deeply, and it feels wrong to question things now, but something seems off. I'll update you in a few days if I get any news on the zip drive or find anything else. 2 days ago, my boyfriend, Aaron, 29M, sent me an email with the contents of the protected folder. His friend managed to hack into it, and what they found has left me deeply disturbed. There were only 3 photos. The first was of a little girl, the same one from the Thanksgiving photos, dressed up in the prettiest little dress and shoes, with a stuffed unicorn beside her. She seemed to be asleep, but a darker reality gnaws at my mind. The second photo showed my mother holding the girl, tears streaming down her face. The last was of a wooden box, ornately detailed on the front and sides, though the picture was taken from too far away to make out any words. But I had my suspicions. I spent the entire night poring over these photos and many others. I think this girl was my parents' actual biological child, and it's starting to seem like they took me from somewhere else. Initially, I considered the possibility of being a twin, but there are no photos with 2 babies. This revelation has me constantly wondering if this child is buried in the spot. The spot is what I call an odd place on my family's land, slightly offset from the main house, where an old tree has grown. I never visited until I was 20, but my father came back every year in early December. My mother was always somber while he was gone, and unusually affectionate when he returned. Once they moved back here, I noticed the spot always had flowers on it, sometimes a wreath at Christmas. When I asked about it a few years ago, they said it was a reminder of the family members who had passed. I accepted that explanation at the time. Yesterday, I did something that tore me apart inside. I dug up the spot. I feel terrible about it, especially because of what I found. I found the box. I didn't open it because I knew what was inside. My name was carved on the front. Lisa Kimberly Nolan, May 19th, 2013 to December 5th, 2013. This was my parents' biological daughter. That's when I realized I was either adopted, kidnapped, or bought. I continued digging through my parents' house during the day and examining photos at night. I hadn't paid much attention to the other people in many of the photos until now. When I took a closer look at my father's only photo from his time in the Marines, I saw him with another man. My dad never liked talking about his military days, and I never pressed. This man appeared in a few photos from 2013, including Thanksgiving, and first showed up in my mother's photos in 2012. In total, he appeared in about 10 pictures. Today, I decided to visit my grandfather. He lives in a nursing home and has Alzheimer's. I wasn't expecting much, as his lucid moments are rare. The nurses told me he occasionally speaks of things from decades ago. I went there hoping to learn anything about this man. My grandfather mostly sat there quietly as I talked. But when I showed him the picture and pointed to the man, he started nodding and eventually mumbled, "Chris." He repeated it, "Chris, Chris, Chris." I was shaken and wondered if this man still lived around here. As I passed by the nurse's station on my way out, one nurse asked, "How was Mr. Nolan today?" I replied, "Oh, as well as expected. Can I ask if you've ever seen this man? My grandpa said his name is Chris." The first nurse said no, but the second nurse looked shocked. "Oh my God, I have to look. I swear that's him," she said as she pulled out her phone. Oh my God, I was right. That's Christopher Curry. I'm a huge true crime fan. I'd recognize him anywhere." Startled, I asked, "Who is he?" She eagerly explained, "Christopher Curry from the Merry Christmas Massacre. He burned his whole family alive on Christmas Eve, shot his sister multiple times. She survived, if you can believe it, and kidnapped her baby, whose body was never found. Then he turned himself in. It's my favorite case. He lived just a few towns from here. You should watch the Netflix documentary, Burning Lies." I thanked her and quickly ended the conversation. Back at my hotel, I searched for the documentary on Netflix. Watching it was the most horrifying experience of my life. I cried through most of it. When they showed a picture of his sister Alicia holding her baby, I paused it. That was the same baby from my first Christmas photo in the camper. I am Ivy Rose West, the baby he took that night. How could my parents be okay with this? They had to have known what he was going to do. I understand their grief over losing their baby, but to go along with such a monstrous act, I feel sick. I can barely breathe. They were so wonderful, yet they allowed this to happen. How? I don't know what I'll do next. I'm supposed to retrieve their ashes tomorrow and spread them on the spot where they always said they wanted to be. Now I understand why. It's all so messed up. I wish I had never started digging into this. After returning to Colorado, I told Aaron everything I'd uncovered. We watched the documentary together, and he pointed out how much I resembled Alicia. I hadn't noticed that during my first watch, being so focused on the baby girl. We had several long discussions about my next steps. There were two things I wanted to do. Alicia West, who changed her name to Alicia Curry West after the documentary aired 15 years ago, now makes her living as a public speaker. She travels mainly to high schools, sharing speeches about honesty and overcoming adversity. It sounds ironic, given how all this started. Her website shares a similar story to the documentary. Her personal statement talks about owning her past lies and giving inspirational speeches about honesty and the consequences of deceit, which seems fitting. Their tagline is, "From self-centered to selfless." She discusses overcoming adversity, the loss of her child and family, recovering from her gunshot wounds, and facing Chris Curry in court. She accepts donations and supports victims of domestic violence through her foundation, with public speaking being the main fundraiser. It's all quite dramatic, but considering what she went through and survived, it's understandable. There's even a section dedicated to finding her daughter. Finding me with a reward offer, old photos, and age-progressed images that resemble me. I took the contact information from the Finding Ivy section and sent an email. I included photos from my parents with Chris and pictures of me from that Christmas. I wanted to show I was serious about meeting and would be happy to get a DNA test. I added my phone number to the email. About 6 hours later, Alicia called. She was crying, and soon I was too. Aaron listened quietly. We talked about my life, and I could sense her disdain for my parents. I can't blame her, they allowed this to happen. We agreed to a paternity test, which she offered to pay for. After our call, her assistant gave me all the necessary details. I just had to submit my sample to a local lab, give them Alicia's code, and we'd have immediate results. The next day, I did just that. The lab tech confirmed it was a perfect match. Alicia was my mother. Alicia must have set up a notification because she called me immediately. She sounded almost hysterical and wanted to fly me out to Chicago as soon as possible. I was already on day 9 of my 10-day bereavement leave. I called my boss and explained the whole unbelievable story. He told me he couldn't extend my bereavement leave, but would approve PTO for as much as I had earned. I decided to take it. I had about a month's worth. I called Alicia back and agreed to go to Chicago, but I wanted to make a stop first. She asked where, and I told her it might be triggering. She just replied, "Fort Madison." I said yes, I want to confront my uncle. She asked me to wait, wanting to talk about something important first. She booked me 2 first-class tickets for the next day. Aaron came with me, and Alicia had a car pick us up at the airport. Her office was incredible. When Aaron and I arrived, we exchanged pleasantries. Alicia hugged me like she didn't want to let go. She looked amazing for someone who was 51. After the introductions, she asked Aaron for some girl time. We talked for hours about everything: pole vaulting, high school, my upbringing, her family, my real father, her job, my job, and so on. It was great getting to know her, though she had a bit of an arrogant vibe, which I guess comes with being a successful philanthropist. Alicia insisted we stay at her house. It was huge, and I couldn't believe how much she was making. When I asked, she said it was Netflix money. The next day, I woke up early and she was happy to see me. She asked me to come into the office with her. She gave me a tour of her operation, and I met some of the people. They didn't seem as friendly as I expected for people doing such selfless work. I suppose working with victims of domestic violence takes a toll. After the tour, Alicia sat me down and said she had a business proposition. I was surprised. She explained that Burning Lies had been one of Netflix's most popular documentaries, and when she told them we had reunited, they were eager to do a follow-up. It would mean a lot of money for both of us. I think she saw my hesitation because her tone softened as she tried to empathize. I asked what this would entail. She said they definitely wanted an interview with the two of us together and to film my confrontation with Chris. I was really apprehensive. I had no idea how I'd react in person. She assured me I'd be safe, Erin, and she would be there, whatever I needed. She also said it was unlikely I'd get the chance any other way. Chris had denied Alicia numerous times over the years, even during the documentary. If Netflix was involved, the prison authorities would make Chris comply, but without them, it was unlikely I'd get to see him. I told her I needed to think about it. She said that was expected and to take my time. Erin and I are both here at Alicia's house now. He's relaxing while I type this out. He's been supportive, but not very decisive, telling me to do what I think is best and that he'll back me 100%. While I appreciate it, I really just want someone to tell me what to do right now. This is all so overwhelming. 2 weeks ago, I was Lisa Nolan, grieving the tragic loss of my parents. Now, I'm Ivy West, with a major studio wanting to film my confrontation with my mass murderer uncle. I don't know what to do. A big part of me wants to do this, but I'm also terrified. My life is unrecognizable from what it was just a few months ago. Now, I'm about to board a private plane to Fort Madison, where I'll come face to face with a mass murderer. They keep assuring me I'm in no danger. There will be guards, he'll be chained, and he's been a model prisoner for 25 years. Somehow, none of that comforts me. So much has happened since my last post. The pressure was on the very next morning after Alicia proposed the Netflix update. She had a million reasons why this would be good for us, and when she told me the estimated payout, I was stunned. This could set me up for life. I didn't last long before agreeing to be part of the project. Lawyers were at the door that same week, and we were locked in. Then things took a swift nosedive. You know when you should trust your gut, but don't, because what's being promised seems too good to pass up. If that feeling were a person, it would be Alicia Curry West. Shortly after sealing the Netflix deal, she came to me with a job offer. She wanted me to join her on the road, doing public speaking engagements and raising funds for the foundation. She sold it to me in so many ways. We could make up for lost time, make a difference in kids' lives, honor my birth father, maybe even get more TV deals. She offered to start me at $100K a year. I didn't know what to say. I'd been at my job for 3 years, and this was a huge raise. I accepted and told my boss I wouldn't be returning. After I agreed, Alicia asked if I'd start calling her mom, and I reluctantly agreed. Even with a sneaking feeling that something was off, I ignored it. I had my real mom now. She was rich, and she wanted me to have the same life she had. I started working with her immediately. Over the past month, we've been planning speaking engagements and discussing our angle. What bothered me was her desire to portray my life as extremely negative. It wasn't that she was lying, but she exaggerated our hardships, making it seem like I was abused, neglected, and mistreated. She focused on our constant moving, living in campers, and being denied access to society. She even wrote statements implying physical abuse. I don't know what to think of Val and Kim anymore, but they weren't evil. They treated me well and raised me the best they could. I don't want them slandered. After the first week of working with her, I started noticing how self-centered Alicia was. Her assistant always seemed on the verge of tears, trying to anticipate Alicia's next move. She wasn't kind to any of the staff. I tried to be friendly with them, but they were all nervous around me. After overhearing someone say, "The bitch denied my raise but brought her new little pet in at 3 times my salary," I began to question how much of the foundation was genuinely dedicated to helping victims. With a financial and accounting background, I went to Alicia 2 weeks in and asked to review the company finances, pretending I wanted to maximize intake. Surprisingly, she agreed. She had only known me for a few weeks, and while she was trying to play the role of a mother, letting me access anything seemed naively generous. Going through the books made me sick. It was all just a front. Her marketing claimed she was out in schools and neighborhoods, preaching about doing the right thing. In reality, speaking engagements were rare. The dozen or so events at high schools and shelters each year were just marketing ploys. Most of her money came from donations at do-gooder events and dinners for rich people looking for tax write-offs. I thought, if this gets more resources and help for victims, maybe it's still worthwhile. But no, only about 9% of every dollar collected went to actual victims. This foundation pulls in close to $2.5 million annually. Last year, only $210,000 went to victims' organizations. The employees weren't getting paid much either. The starting salary was decent, but raises were few and small. The operating costs were high, mostly for fancy events to impress rich donors. The largest chunk of money went to Alicia. She listed her salary the same as the employees, but she lived in a company home, had 3 luxury company vehicles, and gave herself a ridiculously high per diem whenever she was out of the office. In recent years, she had traveled for conferences, speaking engagements, and company retreats to places like San Francisco, Paris, and Tokyo. When I asked about it, she didn't get defensive or angry. She bragged. She laid it all out thinking she was teaching me something. Going to a high school meant bigger donations at dinners and socials. She explained, never pay someone the minimum. They'll leave because they can. You want to give them a good offer, then keep them through their own necessity. Give them just enough to live a little, just enough to make them reconsider leaving. Then you've got them for good. Her unethical practices aside, I asked how she felt about the people she was supposed to be helping. She didn't even comprehend my question. She truly believed she was doing everything she could for victims and that her foundation did all it could. I asked about the amenities she gave herself, and she said, "It's just my pay. I dedicate my life to helping others. I've earned this." This woman is a total narcissist. For the next few weeks, I tried to contribute and be her little prot GCGGC, but I was appalled by what I learned and knew I had to do something, though I wasn't sure what. This meant playing along with Alicia. Here's a recap of things I've learned. She's had almost every form of plastic surgery, all medically necessary and covered by her company, of course. She even offered to get me new boobs, saying, "You're young now, but a little enhancement never hurt." She planned a 4-day company retreat to Aspen and said it was a birthday present, even though my birthday is in May and it was July. When I asked why we were going there in the summer, she just said to consider it a birthday present. Erin could join us, but she never brings any staff. I pointed out that I noticed others on previous retreats in the records. She explained that she often hires a guy she wants to sleep with a few days before, takes him on these company retreats, then lets him go when they return. Then, a huge blow. One night I heard a commotion from the bathroom. Erin was there in a towel, and Alicia was topless, trying to cover her nipples. Erin said she came in like that, asking if he needed help. Alicia denied everything, saying she was getting ready and came in topless by accident, and that Erin came on to her. I knew he wasn't lying. He was so upset. It came down to an ultimatum, him or her. I wanted so much more with Erin, but I couldn't let her keep doing this. I had to say goodbye to Erin. I tried to reach out, but I was blocked. Goodbye, Erin. This loss, however, became a blessing. Alicia now trusted me completely. I suggested a PR campaign on our reunion, and she loved the idea. We launched I Am Ivy West. I also suggested making it legally official that I was her daughter. She was happy to do this, and her lawyers quickly processed it. We finally started filming. There were 3 parts, an interview with both of us, one with us and Chris, and a follow-up interview on our thoughts about facing Chris. The first interview was awful. It was all about bashing Val and Kim, painting them as monsters. Alicia kept speaking for me when they came up, pushing the narrative that she was saving me from my past. It was sickening. Yes, they did something terrible, but they weren't terrible to me. Yet again, I had to go along with it. I keep telling myself that to make everything right, I have to keep going, but it's getting harder. The car is waiting for me. The next test is here. Wish me luck, and I'll update when it's over. I know you're all eager to hear what happened, so here it goes. Alicia joined us in the car to the airport, chatting away, clearly excited. Meanwhile, I felt anything but. She eventually noticed and asked what was wrong. Trying to deflect, I said, "I'm just thinking about Aaron." She replied, "Oh, sweetie, you're better off without him. He wasn't strong enough for women like us." That hurt, but I pushed on. Was my dad strong enough? She laughed shortly. Not at all. Although he had more spine than I expected, he made me confess to Chris, which got him killed. No, he was just a means to an end. Honestly, between us, I'm not sure he was your father. You were having an affair? I couldn't hide my disgust. No, but that doesn't mean I didn't have some fun on the side. He traveled a lot for work, and I'd treat myself to weekend getaways. Things happened. I mean, he's probably your father. She noticed my reaction and added, "Did I hit a nerve? You'll learn eventually. One person isn't enough for anybody long term. Everyone does it. I just learned early. Besides, it runs in the family. Chris wasn't my father's kid, and everyone knew it except Chris. Why do you think I was everyone's favorite?" I was stunned, but she kept talking. "Oh, don't feel bad. My dad had affairs too. He liked femboys. He'd donate to anti-gay causes one day, then turn around and buy some 19-year-old guy the next. He even backed my aunt when she disowned Robert." In disbelief, I asked, "Who's Robert?" She continued, "My cousin. He was 17 at the time of the fire. He came out to my aunt just before the holidays, and she disowned him on the spot. So did my grandparents. If they hadn't, he would have burned with the others." It worked out for me, though. Not only did I get life insurance for Billy, but also my parents', aunts, and grandparents' assets, nearly $3 million. Robert visited me in the hospital, but I had him thrown out. I didn't need that image on top of everything else. I couldn't hold back any longer. "You were all awful." She frowned. "Ivy, pull the stick out of your ass and grow up. We did what we had to for the family." I just looked at her and said, "Michelle." She asked, "What?" "My name is Michelle." That pissed her off, and I got a sense of satisfaction. At the very least, I bought myself the silent treatment for the flight. We arrived and spent the night at a nearby hotel. I had to endure Alicia's complaints. It wasn't up to her standards. The next day, she ended the silent treatment and told me she forgave me for being rude. We got to the prison and they took us into the interview room. They prepped us with some questions and explained the process. I had a request. I wanted to shake Chris's hand. Everyone seemed confused, but the producer loved the idea. It took some convincing, but the security team agreed to loosen his restraints enough for a handshake with guards over each shoulder. I agreed. When we were situated, they brought him in. He was so unassuming. If you put him in a lineup of 100 random men and asked someone to pick out the multi-murderer, he would be one of the last picked. They chained him to his seat, leaving just enough slack for him to raise his hands. I walked over, looked him in the eye, and our hands met. It was surreal. He forever altered my life for the better. How would I have been raised by those people? I saw his eyes react, and though we said nothing, I think he sensed I had learned who she really was. The interview began. Chris sat across from us, maybe 15, 20 feet away. The guards moved to the walls. Alicia immediately launched into a theatrical monologue about staring into the face of evil. I tired of it quickly. The producers asked us so many questions. I was playing along, giving everyone what they wanted, when I finally noticed the tapping. Chris was tapping his leg the whole time, signaling me. He expected my father, my real father, had taught me Morse code. He was right. It took me a minute, but I realized he was saying, "Push." I was finally asked, "Ivy, is there anything you want to say to Chris?" I looked at my uncle and said, "For the murder of Billy West, you deserve to be here, but I want to thank you. If not for you, I would have been raised by this awful person sitting beside me instead of the great parents I had." At that point, I pushed the button on my watch, and a recording of everything Alicia had said over the months began to play. I had it organized so the worst confessions played first, assuming she'd interrupt quickly. She stood up, screaming, "You ungrateful bitch!" I stayed seated and yelled, "Don't talk to me, you cruel, psychotic, manipulative whore." Enraged, she grabbed me by the neck. That was exactly what I wanted her to do. I jumped up and shoved her hard. She tumbled backward right into Chris's lap. I swear I heard him say, "Gotcha." It happened so fast, I have no idea how he hit it on himself. The sharp metal shard entered Alicia's throat, and he yanked hard backward. The entire right side of her throat seemed to tear out. It was one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen. There was no saving her. She bled so much, so fast. Chris just laughed as the guards pounced on him. I was rushed into another room. Now, I'm back in my hotel room trying to make sense of everything, wondering why I don't feel guilty. I'm sure this will catch up with me eventually, but for now, I take solace in knowing I'm not like her. I'm not anything like her. I am Michelle Kimberly Nolan, daughter of Val and Kim Nolan. It's been years since my last update, and a lot has happened since then. After my last post, everything fell apart. In just 5 months, I lost my parents, found out I was kidnapped, learned my uncle massacred my biological family, reconnected with my birth mother, moved to a new city, started a new job, discovered my birth mother was a psychopath, lost my boyfriend, realized my biological relatives were horrible people, watched my birth mother get killed by my uncle, and then had to finish that documentary. What was supposed to be a 90-minute update turned into a 2-part series exploring my biological family's history and Alicia's foundation. There wasn't much more revealed beyond what Alicia had already told me. I started therapy right away and have continued for 4 years, although now it's mostly to help me manage the stress of running a large foundation. I inherited everything from Alicia and decided to take over completely. Despite not feeling ready, I managed to fake it till I made it. The staff was incredibly supportive, and I think they appreciated the substantial raises. My assistant no longer looks like she's constantly defusing a bomb. Things are going well. I sold the company house, 2 of the cars, and cut back on per diem and trips. We restructured a lot. Now I mostly visit high schools, shelters, and other places to give speeches. This is the main focus of the foundation, although I kept the galas and dinners for the elite donors because their contributions go a long way, even if I dislike those events. We've increased the percentage of proceeds going to help victims of domestic abuse to 47%. We also established the Billy West Memorial Scholarship for kids in foster care. I never met him, but I hope he would be proud of me. I also have no intention of ever looking deeper into my parentage. Billy and Val are my real fathers, Kim is my real mother, and that's enough for me. Many of you have asked, but Aaron and I never reconnected. A couple of months after the prison incident, I managed to reach him. I apologized and explained myself. He was sympathetic, but shared how much it hurt him. We both cried during the conversation, but it gave us some closure. He wasn't interested in restarting anything. He had started dating someone else about 6 weeks earlier. We remained friends on social media. He ended up marrying that girl, and she is now very pregnant with their first child. He posts almost daily about his excitement. I'm happy for him. He deserves it. I tracked down Robert, my great-aunt's son, and my only known biological relative who isn't in prison, dead, or a total mess. He's had a tough life since being on his own at 17, but made the most of it. He's not rich, but has a good life. He lives in California, runs his own wellness business, and has been married to his husband Orlando for 10 years. I sent them a very late wedding gift. When he said he couldn't accept so much from someone he just met, I told him to think of it as his long overdue inheritance. We still message, and last year I got to meet him face to face for the first time. As for me, I enjoy city life and have been dating David, 38M, for the past year. He is a professor in the Department of Human Genetics at the University of Chicago. He jokes that he never thought anyone could top his crazy family stories until he met his best friend Tim in college. Now, after meeting me, he says he's going to avoid all new people because he doesn't want to meet anyone with a crazier story than mine. We're talking about moving in together within the next year. Anyway, that's my update. Almost forgot. Chris got another life sentence for killing Alicia, but when you're already serving 8 life sentences, who really cares? He's gone back to not allowing visitors. I might try to write to him soon, but I can't figure out how to thank someone for murder. If I do figure that out, I'll let you all know.